Welcome to Lyve Talks, a podcast by Lyve, a tech and logistics company headquartered in Abu Dhabi. On Lyve Talks, we tackle fintech, logistics, business, and best practices in the workplace. I'm Karim the VP of Strategy at Lyve Global, and I will be your host. Welcome to a new episode of Lyve Talks. Today, we'll be discussing the automation of digitization of restaurants and kitchens. Joining me in this discussion is Omar Rifai, the Chief Growth Officer and co-founder of Grubtech. Welcome, Omar.
Thank you, Karim. It's a pleasure.
Maybe before we start, maybe you can give a very quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, great. Appreciate it. I'm a finance guy by background. Spent about 15 years doing private equity in New York and the Middle East. And part of that involved investing in tech companies. And that's where I got the tech bug, so to speak. A couple of years ago, ended up co-founding Grubtech on the back of a thesis we had around digitization in the F&B space, especially as the F&B space was evolving.
Nice, very nice. Maybe before we start with the conversation, I'll give a context for the listeners and the viewers to understand a bit more what are we talking about. So restaurants and kitchens, they need to digitize and automate their restaurant operations. This has been massively accelerated during the pandemic. Obviously, I've looked at some of the numbers and I'll just read them because it was insane. So some of the online food deliveries, and that impacts right away the operations of restaurants and kitchens, it was worth around 7 billion in 2020. That shot up to 127 billion in 2021. Obviously, that's because of the pandemic. But and the expectations it will continue to grow to reach around 200 billion in 2025. And that's globally. Obviously, now that we went back to norm, the momentum is still there. I think all the restaurants now are thinking, okay, this is something that I need to do, which is accelerating all the digitalization of ordering in general. So anything related to ordering and making sure that you're fully automated and delivering has suddenly become the talk of the merchants, if I can say that word. So maybe that brings me to the question. So why Grubtech and how did you get into founding this company?
Yeah, those are some interesting trends and they're definitely continuing that trend. So the history of Grubtech started around one particular business model within F&B, and it was a new business model called a cloud kitchen. We ended up noticing that some of these cloud kitchens really had no starting point when it came to adopting any technology to help in their particular business model, which is delivery only, plenty of brands out of one location, and a lot of pressure to make sure that from click to doorbell, you're condensing the time. Consumers don't want to wait more than 50 minutes, 45 minutes, and now they're getting even pickier. And what we ended up doing is creating a software that does two things primarily. One initially was plug in these cloud kitchens into all of the online channels. That's the food aggregators, Talabat, Deliveroo, etc. But also at the same time, create a direct channel for the consumer to be able to order directly from the brand. And that entailed doing a lot of integrations with all of these players.
Correct.
The second thing we ended up doing was solving for this big black box of what happens from the second an order comes in to when it's delivered, only because that particular business model required everybody to do it fast. And it's an operationally complex kitchen if you've ever been into one. And so we solved that problem. This was right before the pandemic. So initially our customer base were cloud kitchens, but then during the pandemic, all of the restaurants, big restaurant groups were calling and saying, hey, we are effectively a delivery only operation right now. And in order to survive and thrive in this new environment, we will start putting virtual brands into our existing dine-in concept. So many restaurants you might frequent, you might not see this, but in the back, they're actually cooking delivery-only brands. So that opened up the customer base for us to the restaurant community. And what we noticed after solving, this initial problem for them during the pandemic is that, in general, the technology stack that's available for the traditional F&B operation is not keeping up with the way the consumer wants to interact with the restaurant. So today, you might have a preference to order from the office, from your house, but now you interact with F&B players when you are on vacation, when you are in an airport, when you are at a music festival. More importantly, when you do go dine in, there's nothing really that's changed over the last 40 years.
Correct.
When it comes to waitress or waiter being involved. the way you pay. So we started solving for a lot of these, in a sense, following what the consumer preference was. Because if we provide technology to the restaurateur, it's effectively all for one goal, which is for him to serve his customer better. So rather than focus on all of the pain points of the restaurateur, which we did, we now started shifting and focusing on the pain points that the customer is having when they interface with that restaurant.
Very important. I mean, the approach that you're taking from the customer perspective, I'm sure is always the right thing, because at the end, it's the customer who's buying from the merchant. So we need to make sure. What I find interesting is you just talked about the cloud kitchen. I remember seeing a video once in one of these multiple brands where they had, I remember on the wall, like 200 tablets. They have so many brands, and then for each delivery partner like Talabat or any of the other ones, it was not in the UAE, it was actually somewhere in Europe, I don't remember which city, but it was staggering. You can see like the guy just have this like wall of things, and he's just trying to figure out, okay, which one is going to ping first, and he's just jumping around to make sure that he's delivering all the orders. And I'm sure that's the whole point at the beginning of where you started.
Absolutely. The first thing we solved for was what we call tablet hell.
Tablet hell. It has a name.
It does have a name. It is called tablet hell. And you brought up a great example. So historically, for a cloud kitchen, if they had 10 brands being cooked and delivered out of that location, and they were listed on 5 food aggregators, which are popping up left, right, and center. A lot of them are smaller, but they still are. That means he had 50 tablets.
Correct.
And you needed a whole dedicated staff. And then, the problem goes beyond that from a tech standpoint. It's not just, okay, aggregate all this, but more importantly, it has to talk to other systems.
Correct.
Inventory, perhaps you're delivering through a third party like Lyve. And we made sure, like, first thing we did was get rid of tablet hell, consolidate everything to one centralized view and order ingestion. But more importantly, make sure it speaks to other parts, other systems that are being used.
Very interesting. I'm very fascinated about this whole change. I mean, it's been going on for a while now. And tell us, maybe, I mean, I'm sure your customers have been impacted a lot by all this change. I mean, I'm assuming, of course, the hell of tablet is a nice thing, but beyond that, the impacts that we've seen is probably speed, better preparation, more time, better preparation time, delivery. Maybe we talk more about that.
Yeah, so when you start extending into let's stick to cloud kitchens a bit and how they've evolved, and I'll tell you how the restaurants are doing it. So from a cloud kitchen perspective, you've solved tablet hell for them. You've also then solved for them what happens from the second an order is made to the second it's delivered in terms of transparency. The next layer there is data. They need to know what's happening. And for them, that's how they become more efficient. You can only improve what you measure, so to speak. So we're going into that field, and there are more and more layers of efficiency. So for example, we launched food cubbies recently. Okay. We've been experimenting them with a couple of customers like Talabat, for instance, and Majd al-Futaim in one of their malls, but now we're going larger with it. The dispatching area of a cloud kitchen, right, at lunchtime, you still have plenty of drivers coming in to pick up all these brands. It becomes chaotic. And that also has an issue when it comes to time. Remember, you're shaving minutes and seconds out of a 45-minute journey trying to bring it down to 32. So now we're putting in these food cubbies so that the drivers that are around the dispatching area are organized. They basically are told when to come in, which locker to go to. They scan a QR code, locker opens, they take it and they leave. On the restaurant front, it's pretty interesting in terms of what the requirements are, because when you look at the restaurants, what they're forced to do is say, okay, Grubtech is a great solution, but now Grubtech needs to talk to other systems. They have a system called a point of sale.
Yeah.
So we now need to talk to the point of sale.
Correct.
Which we do. And we started integrating with them. But what we're realizing is some point of sale solutions are quite rigid and archaic. They were built and designed for an F&B business model that really catered around one branch, one location.
And dine-in only.
Yeah. Right? So now you have the problem where we've enabled, and other players in the ecosystem have enabled a large portion of the sales to come from delivery. But that causes some chaos in the kitchen, because traditionally, order would be punched in by a waiter, a ticket would be printed, taken to the kitchen, they were put in order, and the food was prepared in order. Well, now there's mayhem, Now I got all those orders in store. I have 5 different delivery aggregators that I'm plugged into seamlessly, getting orders from them. How do I time that? Then you have guys that started looking into how they organize their kitchen to accommodate for this higher volume. More volume is fantastic, but some people started changing the layouts of their kitchen. And what that involved is stations for certain menu items. So think of McDonald's. You ever see how they're organized?
Correct.
Right? Best in
they
class.
Have a station for French fries, a station for burger, a station for every single thing they do.
It's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
That's how they get your food so fast. But that's now being adopted by a lot of customers by force, kind of, so that they could keep up with the demand that's coming in from in-store and online. So we started putting in features that allowed for decomposing an order, routing it to different stations, and then recomposing it. And we're getting even more sophisticated in terms of timing. So let's use the burger and fry example to keep things simple. The burger might take 4 minutes to prepare. The fries might be readily available, right? So I don't want to take the fries from where they're ready and make them cold. I want to actually start syncing things from timing. Like tell my burger guy to start, and then only after 3 minutes tell the fry station guy to get the fries ready, and then recompose it. So that's what's happening in the operations. But then actually where the customer sits and interacts, that's also evolving very quickly. The first and most important thing is people, the way they pay, right? We're used to very traditional credit card machines being brought to the table, but now we're coming up with features where a waiter can basically walk and take payments, obviously on a tablet that also involves taking the order. And then we're very excited to launch our pay by QR code feature coming up in July. So what this does is it reduces the amount of time that a waiter needs to spend on tasks that can easily be handled by the customer. Order, today you scan a QR code, you get a menu. Yeah. That's kind of outdated.
PDF, old style.
We're changing that now, right? So we already have order by QR code. We're now coupling it with pay by QR code. So in theory, you could walk into a place, place your order, someone delivers it, and then you could pay. You don't really have to interact much. And if you look at places like China, the food's now being delivered by robots. So
I've seen it at Expo. I don't know if you went to the Japanese restaurant when you were at the Expo. It was all automated.
Would have loved to see it. I used to travel a lot to China, and we used to see it a lot there, and I was always jealous of how efficient
it was impressive. You sit, there was a tablet, then you look at the tablet, you start punching whatever you want, and then it doesn't let you order more specific number of items because I think they don't want to pile up too much, and then you press enter, and then there was some sort of automated thing, and you can see your food coming.
Yeah.
And then it just jumps, and then it's on your table. The only thing they didn't deliver with this is the drinks. So if you want a drink, they'll get a guy. But apart from this, it was seamless. Even the payment was a bit even more. It was they look at the colors of the plates, and then they just scan it, and then it just gives you the total. You paid the guy, and you're gone.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
That's maybe something we want to do. Probably they're already there, and we're just looking behind.
Yeah, no, we're striving for that. We want that. In your example, for instance, we don't see a need for tablets anymore in restaurants. Your phone.
Correct.
That's all you need.
Correct. The only thing I've noticed is I was at a couple of restaurants lately where there is a QR code. And I wanted to use it. So I QR code, it was a menu. I started, so the waiter comes, he's like, no, it's okay. I'm going to punch it on my tablet. I think, but there's the QR code. He's like, no, because it takes more time. And he's just starting to get me excuses. Not sure what was happening there. I said, okay, fine. I'll stop my order on the QR. I'll order directly. So maybe more education is needed also from how they used to operate.
It's absolutely right. We need more adoption. So we need to educate the consumer about the benefits. We need to educate, obviously, the merchant about the benefits. But more importantly, you also need to make sure the technology works. Part of the reason that waiter probably said that is because they weren't talking to each other properly.
You're right. I did dig deeper in it because I was very interested. I was like, can you tell me what's wrong? He's like, oh, but the system is not integrated. So if I punch it here, someone else is going to have to punch it again, and then it will be delayed. The kitchen is not going to get the information. I said, okay, fine. Let's remove this. But then it beats the purpose of having QR codes. So
Absolutely.
I said, remove the QR codes if you're not ready.
And to add on that, this is one of the issues that the merchant is having is you have a lot of these technologies coming out in isolation. So there are guys that pay by QR code alone. There are guys that give you the point of sale alone. Then there are other guys that sit on top of it. And then you have some guys that are trying to do delivery management. Our thesis has always been one-stop shop. Right? If we can't provide it all, like you could buy our products in isolation, but We want you to have one neck to choke if something goes wrong. And more importantly, everything for us involves very deep integrations. These are nothing but a bunch of systems speaking to each other. There are systems, but we've built them in isolation. So what we've really built is a super highway of data that flows through to them, and that changes the experience.
We see that. I completely agree with you. I mean, we have the same approach, which is, if you want something, it has to be fully integrated, but also more and more merchants that you talk to, they want a solution. They don't want anymore to deal with 5 different things. Oh, I have one for reservations and another one for QR and another one for ordering and another one for... They're like, we're tired. We just want one solution. And I think it's just an evolution of things, right? Because when we started, there was no one-stop shop solutions. And then the restaurants were trying to plug different things together. I also believe the next step is people thinking, I want one solution. I don't want to deal anymore with all these, especially also from the data perspective. At the end, data is what's important. And they want the data to be in one place.
Absolutely.
If they have them spread out in 5 different places, they'll never be able to understand what's happening.
It's very painful.
So,
and it's already tough operating an F&B operation, right? We know
Correct.
that's not an easy business model, but what you just described adds so much more pain to them.
You keep mentioning cloud kitchens and big we call them ghost kitchens also, like all this new thing, which is also dark kitchens, different names now. Is this what I think is your main business, like your main clients? Are you trying to look at beyond that, or?
No, actually, we're slowly deviating away from them. So today, I would say about 40% of our customers are cloud kitchens, 60% are restaurants, and most of the restaurants are enterprise restaurant groups. They are guys that don't have the luxury of trying to stitch up a few solutions. It no longer works because they're operating 100, 150, 200 locations. So we're very much in the broader F&B industry. Other customers we're getting into is hotels. They're really focused on that interaction. The consumer is not really happy with a lot of the food choices in hotels. You have the nice restaurants, but when you're at the beach, they like a little bit more. They want the service to be better. So you're seeing a little bit of that here in Dubai. They adopt a lot of technology, order by QR code, but still not perfected.
I was having the exact conversation yesterday with someone. The hotel seems to be stuck in the old times where you have like a menu, a static menu, you can't change. Can't order more. It even goes beyond that. Like, why am I stick to this menu? I want something else. More and more deliveries are happening to hotels, and it's killing their own food business.
So it's funny you mention that. One of our customers is the Accor Hotel Group, and they operate cloud kitchens within their kitchen. So one of the most underutilized pieces of or underutilized kitchens in the world is definitely at hotels. They're designed for full occupancy, catering, weddings. So you walk into it, it's like a deserted island.
Correct.
But interestingly enough, we're seeing more and more hotels bring in brands. Some of them are creating their own brands. Some of them are bringing in third-party brands. And they're giving the guest an option to choose from these nice brands. And this is live now in some of the locations we power. Scan a QR code, order, pay, leave, or it comes to your room. And then what they're doing also smartly is delivering within that radius. So they're making better use of that fixed cost of equipment and staff.
Yeah, I heard about it also. Core Group was probably one of the first that trying to think about this thing. Utilization of assets is very low. These kitchens are just there. Let's just use them for something else. And it will be helpful for our own customers, but also utilize it for delivery.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely a direction also we see. Earlier, you mentioned also the importance of integrations. Obviously, point of sales, delivery partners like Lyve, other ones. How do you see this evolving, right? Because in one end, you were talking about solution-based, but at the end, you also have partners that you need to deal with. How do you balance this?
Correct. Our philosophy is we want to be the primary operating system for a kitchen or an F&B operation, and we no longer think there is a heart and soul. Before, it used to be the point of sale. But that's going to change. We think the point of sale will be your cell phone eventually. So if point of sale is an added feature you need. The way we view integrations is, and to your point, we don't necessarily have all the solutions. So a lot of our solutions are native, but if we don't have it, we integrate with them. We want our customer to have access to everything they need in a very simplified, central way. Almost like we like to say, like the Apple iOS, right? You have Google Maps, you have Apple Maps, you choose what you want, but please just stay using iOS. I learned this about integrations because I'm not a tech guy by background. I'm a numbers geek, right? Private equity.
Yeah.
And integrations can mean a lot of things. There's a lot of information that flows when you integrate with someone. So the first thing is we never claim we have an integration until it's fully bidirectional. Why is that important? Because you could sit there and speak and scrape data from someone and say, oh, I'm integrated with them. I'm integrated with Lyve, but really we're just scraping data and Lyve might not like it. Eventually they might cut us off. Or you could do it's a real bidirectional information. So information is flowing two ways, but more importantly, what information is flowing? That's another very important thing, because if you have a limited amount of information flowing between the two systems from an integration, it has a lot of other limitations. So we spend a lot of time getting deep, thorough pipes into other systems so that things don't break down. There's a lot of stability and information flow is perfect.
More effort though, much more effort. A lot of tech companies or a lot of similar companies would try to cut corners on this one, claim integrations with 50, 60, hundreds of other companies. But at the end, most of them must be just unidirectional or very simple integrations.
So very good point. One, we are a team of 160, of which over 105 are product and engineering.
Right.
And as of last month, only 4 in sales. So for us, it was from the very beginning extremely important that we make sure we obviously have a thorough product suite, but at the same time, we have a very adept and agile and strong integrations team. The second thing is you're absolutely right, because we have some modules where we have competitors and they claim they're integrated. So our customers say, oh, but so-and-so has XYZ. We're like, okay, ask them about the details of that integration. So we will never make a claim unless it's truly bidirectional, tested through a bunch of testing sites. And what we typically do is sample it with 1 or 2 customers to make sure it's fully bidirectional.
Of course. Now, looking forward, you mentioned a bit about the trend you see in terms of solutions. And I think we're moving more and more in automating because we need for speed and everything. Where do you see this trend going?
Yeah, that's one that hits home because I'm a huge fan of automation. And I in our daily lives, I see a lot of inefficiencies when it comes to that. There's been a lot of attempts for automation, call it within the kitchen. So I'll speak about that first because that involves robotics and hardware. Yeah. Much easier said than done. We've seen some interesting hardware or robotics or automation tools, and we've had customers ask us to integrate with them because you need to send them, for instance, order details and decompose the order, or send it to the salad maker. It works, and I think the industry is definitely going there, but it'll probably address a certain portion of highly consumed food, so pizza. And there was an attempt by a few companies. The problem is the cost of the hardware and the technology associated with it. It's very difficult to kind of scale and break even. But with that said, I don't think we're too far off. I think you will start seeing more of that in high volume.
That will be scary. So am I expecting to go to a McDonald's and then I can only see robots behind the person?
One day you will, when you really think about it. You'll see it, for instance, start with like the fries section maybe, because that's like easy, right?
Very
There's
easy,
just fries going into fryer, coming out, getting salted. Perhaps pizza makers, peppering in items on top of it. So I think we will see it. I think it'll just take a little bit longer. The other very interesting point in automation is the mundane tasks that take up a lot of time for an operator. One thing we're really excited about, and now we're architecting a solution around, is supply chain. That is a tedious process. You're talking to a bunch of suppliers. You don't have visibility on what they have. They don't have visibility on your demand. It's unfortunately part of that value chain that accounts for a big portion of your cost. It's like 25% of revenue.
And wastage.
And then you have wastage, and unfortunately you have leakage, right? That's oftentimes put in wastage, but
it's leakage.
Yeah, so that's a very, I don't want to say easy one, but we are very focusing on tackling that. There's now a lot of systems that give you automatic purchase orders. They'll find out like, hey, you're out of beef patties. Okay, this is how many you need, and here's a purchase order. But it should go beyond that. It should be similar to how the consumer is ordering from the restaurant. And all of that order detail is ingested and everything is automated when it comes to preparation and delivery. We are looking at a world where the restaurant speaking to suppliers is the same way.
I've seen some companies popping out. I'm trying to remember the name, but there's some of them that started to claim about automating this whole thing to reduce wastage as a single point solution. Again, someone who's popping out some ideas and saying, especially for F&B, because there's so much wastage there. Everybody's trying to and leakage, and trying to solve that problem.
Correct. There's an interesting one out of the valley that just got founded called Gali. There's some supply chain marketplaces that are trying to automate that purchase, that are claiming it has benefits. The only issue is, and we, just like I said, we'll integrate with anyone that provides value to our customers. We're thinking a little bit beyond that, and in order to do that, you need to have full transactional detail on inventory requirements. So if you're not the core system, you might not have that visibility to be very accurate in what you're trying to achieve for that restaurant partner.
That requires also a bidirectional discussion with the supplier, which not everybody is at that stage. So
yes.
You're jumping into another, not problem, but challenge, which is what do you do with the other side?
So funny enough, we've always had this on our roadmap, but now we're seeing the suppliers come up to us and say, we want to plug pipes into you. We'll offer your customers very attractive rates because we disintermediate a bunch of middlemen. Correct. And we will get visibility on what we need to make sure we have in stock, because they themselves, they're not farming it, right? They're buying the beef from someplace. So we're starting to see the push coming from their side rather than the restaurateur side. The restaurateur, unfortunately, for the most part, has taken it as kind of a given, which I think is sad. It's like, okay, I know there's going to be some leakage and wastage. So when it comes from the supplier side and the core system, and you explain to the restaurateur, like, here's what you could save by, activating this module with us, we think adoption will slowly pick up.
Definitely something to look at. In my previous life, I looked at one time at the hotel wastage, and that is impressive. I don't want to even go there, but it was staggering how much there's wastage. And I'm sure by maybe more understanding demand and understanding the supplier, what they can bring, they can reduce that massively.
Hopefully.
So hopefully they do that. Is there a point, you think, when a restaurant or a group of restaurants or a kitchen say, I need this tech, or is it now at the base of operations?
It's now, I need this tech. We've been very fortunate in that we've had a lot of our sales come from reverse inquiry. The groups that need it are cloud kitchens, no doubt. Operational complexity, there's nothing out there, and they're not in a position to stitch stuff. They're growing fast. There's huge demand for what they're doing, and they're constantly tweaking and optimizing, whether it's the brands, their processes. So they don't have the luxury of stitching up tech, and a lot of them don't have the budget or the time to go out there and replicate a system like ours, which is off the shelf, so to speak.
Correct.
The interesting one is the enterprise restaurant groups. They're getting very smart about this, and I think what you're going to start seeing is a convergence of big restaurant groups getting into cloud kitchens, and cloud kitchens starting to do brick and mortar. Katopi is a great example.
Yeah, we've seen this.
And what I think is pretty interesting is the way they're approaching it, because they have, the restaurant groups have supply chain leverage. They do have some data on customers if they're ahead of the game when it comes to accumulating that data.
Correct.
And more importantly, they have the footprint, right? If you go to a restaurant group that has 100 different dine-in locations, he effectively has 100 micro cloud kitchens. Like, he could sit there and multi-tenant. Some of our customers are doing 7 brands out of one small 250 square foot location. The other advantage they have is central processing units. So I think it's very interesting trends. Those guys definitely are within the restaurant category are bigger. They make up 90% of our restaurant customers are enterprise. And then the other very interesting trend we're seeing is host kitchens. So these are small one-off kitchens. They're saying, okay, Grubtech, that's great. You've plugged me in seamlessly into the rest of the world. I'd like to launch a virtual brand or 2.
Okay.
And for us, it's very easy. It's like, okay, send us the menu and you're up and running in literally less than 20 hours. Those guys, they're starting to understand this. I see a world where in about 5 years, you will not be able to justify running a one-brand dine-in location only in an area that has some urban density. It just doesn't make sense because the opportunity is all there. You could sell online. You could put virtual brands that you deliver. So you'll start seeing a lot of them also getting into that game as well.
So coming back, maybe going to my final question now. What do you recommend for restaurants who want to digitize, automate their operations?
I recommend they absolutely start looking into it and not be intimidated by any change management if they're a large group, and to pay special attention to what their consumers want. The consumer preference for how they interact with the restaurateur is changing at a fast pace. And that's why at the beginning I said we're adapting in the same way when it comes to our product roadmap. At some point, a differentiator is accommodating what the consumer wants. And all of the technology that's available out there in the F&B industry, we think Grubtech is one of the best ones, but irrespective, all of that is going to help you serve your customer better. Definitely start looking into it. You need to adapt to how the consumer is changing, and it's only upside, and it's definitely not a difficult proposition relative to what you may think it is.
Great. It was great having you. Thank you for joining us today, Omar. It was a pleasure for me. I really enjoy this topic all the time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for the insightful questions.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
So thank you all the viewers and the listeners being with us, and see you next time on the next episode of Lyve Talks. Thank you.